crypto is just an abstraction. Well, that comes into what type of world do you want to live in? Do you want your trust infrastructure to be owned and controlled by a federated, unchanging oligarchy? So the token creates the resource and it creates the decentralization to maintain and operate that system. Now, if you don't care about that and you say, you know what, I just really trust Microsoft and Google and Amazon, and I really trust the US government or China or whatever, well, then you don't need it. And so unless Elon Musk buys them or some weird black swan event happens, you're stuck with that configuration. So that's kind of crypto in a nutshell. And that's the magic of the smart cow effect, is that when people... Crypto is just an abstraction. It's a set of consensus rules, and it uses a blend of social processes and mathematics and distributed computing and cryptography to basically create something that then acts as this trust layer. It has three core properties. It's immutable, it's time-stamped, and it's irreversible. Everything you put in, you can't change it. You know when you put it in, and everybody can see it. It's auditable. And it doesn't seem like that's valuable, but it turns out it's one of the most valuable things in the world. Trust is one of the most valuable things in the world, and you know it when you're missing it. And the example I like giving people is, let's say you're a rancher and you want to buy some of your neighbor's land. There's two ways that can go down. One way, you're great friends with that neighbor. You're drinking buddies with them. So you go out there and you say, hey, Bill, that 50 acres over there, I want my cattle to graze on that place. I'd like to buy it from you. And Bill's like, well, Charles, great, what price? And you have to haggle over drinks and you come to a term, you shake hands. Now, let's say that you discover a problem with the transaction a month into it. You go back to him, you say, hey, Bill, we got this problem and it's an issue. Can we solve it? And you drink it out, you haggle it out, shake hands. Deal closes, you get the land. The other way it can go down. Let's say you hate your neighbor. You don't trust each other, but you really need the land. So you go to the neighbor and you say, I want to buy your land. He says, well, all right, talk to my lawyer. So your lawyer is talking to his lawyer. Complex negotiation. That issue comes up. Now you're in litigation. You're suing each other. 2 years passed, all this money. You win, got the land. The outcome is exactly the same in both cases. A, you get the land. B, you get the land. What's the difference? The difference was you solved it over alcohol and handshakes and hanging out with your buddy versus you had to litigate and spend an enormous amount of money. What was the difference between those two transactions? One thing, just one thing, trust. That's it. In the first scenario, you like and trust each other. In the second scenario, you don't. So then everything else, it's like a butterfly effect, cascades from there. And at the micro scale, that's it. But at the macro scale, it's the same way. Russia has every incentive to try to find a way to work with Europe and the United States because China's eating them alive. But you just can't get there with the trust. So unfortunately, despite the fact that they have an incentive to try to work with us to solve a major problem they have with China, they can't. And corporations in many cases have incentives to work together because maybe for some product you're building, somebody else has a piece of technology that you need. Like Apple was a great example with Samsung, where Samsung makes all these chips. Apple needed the chips for its iPhone, but Samsung makes phones too. So how does Apple figure out how to buy those chips and work with Samsung, but trust them enough not to steal the iPhone design to use in the Samsung Galaxy? So cooperatively, if they can find a way to make that happen, Samsung makes a fuck ton of money because they get like 100 million iPhones worth of memory sales. But then Apple also gets this state-of-the-art technology that's better for their consumers. But if they can't find a way to work together, then it's patent litigation and this and this and this. So by creating a common space where business processes and government process, any economic, political, or social process can live, and you have trust at the core of it, then all of a sudden you now have a new place for people who don't trust each other to be able to start working together as if they did. And just that example of the lawsuit thing, it shows you the economic consequences of it. Literally, it's creation of tens of trillions to hundreds of trillions of dollars of wealth. You notice that none of this did I talk about a token or a particular cryptocurrency or any of these things. I'm just talking about the abstraction, the concept of a blockchain, this idea of a trust layer for it. Then there's a question of, well, why do the tokens exist? Well, that comes into what type of world do you want to live in? Do you want your trust infrastructure to be owned and controlled by a federated, unchanging oligarchy, or do you want it to be decentralized? If you don't have the token it's going to be controlled by an oligarchy. It has an operator. It has an owner. Somebody has to maintain the infrastructure. People aren't going to volunteer to go hoist up trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure. So if there's no token, there's no instrument to pay for all of those things to exist. You see? So once you have the token, it can pay for its own bills to create a resource that you can use. So Bitcoin creates its own token. Then suddenly we go from me mining on my laptop in 2010 and getting lots of Bitcoins to gigantic mining fields that the president's son, Eric Trump, has and all these other people have, billions of dollars worth of miners. Where was the central Bitcoin Bureau, telling people to do that? There was none. It was just a token. And people, through their own self-interest, independent of any central coordination, came together and they built out that mesh. And now Bitcoin is secured by the largest computer in the world, distributed computer in the world, but secured by the largest function there. So the token creates the resource and it creates the decentralization to maintain and operate that system. Now, if you don't care about that and you say, you know what, I just really trust Microsoft and Google and Amazon, and I really trust the US government or China or whatever, well, then you don't need it. You can run in a federated sense. But here are the consequences. The minute you trust them, they own what goes in that and what doesn't go in that ledger. So if they're told, compelled, or decide themselves to exclude somebody, they can censor anyone from the global order. So they have a monopoly on trust, and they have a monopoly on truth, and they have a monopoly on who gets to play in the pond and who doesn't get to play in the pond. We saw this with social media. Mm-hmm. If they own the platform, they get to decide what's legitimate on the platform, what's not legitimate on the platform. So you say, hey, I'm a doctor and this COVID thing is pretty bad. And, I think these vaccines have issues. Oh, I'm sorry. That's against our community standards. You're blacklisted. You can never speak again. You're deplatformed. Or, Hunter Biden laptop, or, pick your favorite topic, whatever the heck it is. You get blacklisted and banished from the world. And you say, well, that's not fair. Who do I appeal to? There's got to be some, well, actually, yes, that 5 guys, they're not going to change. They control the thing. So unless Elon Musk buys them or some weird black swan event happens, you're stuck with that configuration. When it's decentralized, no one has censorship capabilities. Nobody can come in and say, well, I don't like Sean Ryan. I don't like his content, so I'm going to kick him out. No, everybody gets to play, the good, the bad, and the ugly inside that type of a system. So in a world that's multipolar, in a world that's highly tribal, and there's all these factions fighting each other, it makes a lot of sense to have something where we have something that we all agree on is a universal good thing, and we all use despite our differences. Because once we have that, then we at least have some anchor of trust. Mm-hmm. Is, your agency guys, you probably remember all the Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda didn't try to convince you things were true or not true. They attacked the very concept of truth. They would go out and erode it and get people so fatigued and exhausted that you just don't even care anymore if people are lying. You don't even care anymore what's real and what's not real. You're just exhausted with the whole thing. And that's where we're at in America right now. There's institutional exhaustion. When I was a kid, if you're sitting at a bar and the guy next to you was from the CDC, you'd say, wow, that's really cool. You're the guys who wear the suits and go in and deal with the Ebola and everything. You're a very courageous person. Now you look at it and say, you're the guy who just tried to kill my kids with vaccines and all these other things. Like institutional loss of faith. And the same for the FBI and the CIA, and the same for, in many cases, the military. Like a lot of soldiers who fought in GWOT. They watched their friends die in Afghanistan. And then the U.S. government says, a good outcome for that war was to give it back to the people that we literally took it from. And it's like, oh, well, what was the purpose of all of this then? So you have this institutional anger that's formed, and everybody doesn't trust anything anymore. And then any government report comes out, the first thing people do is they take a look at what their tribe's opinion is, and they don't even care what it says. They just basically say it's true or false based upon what the tribe says. So we just lived through Biden, and under that regime, if the CDC said something or NIH said something, it's 100% true 100% of the time. Now that Robert Kennedy's in and Trump's in control, if the CDC says something and NIH says something, it's 100% false 100% of the time. So much so when they're saying like, hey, these artificial food dyes are pretty bad for people. You have all these people that traditionally, the yoga people and the living health and vegan people, they're like, no, they're awesome. We want some food dyes in our food now. They're great. It's like, what are we doing? It's because you no longer have objectivity in the world. The concept of truth has been damaged. So that's what blockchain is basically selling. Is it's selling this idea of objective reality in a truth, a synthetic objective reality. Then you can build an economic system from it. Then you can build a political system from it. Then you can build a social system from it, a way of communicating with each other. And if you have faith and belief in the underlying mathematics and the level of decentralization, then you start trusting the outputs of these systems. When I send you a transaction, you say, well, how do I really know I have the money? Well, if the system works in this way, you have it because you can check it from the ledger. Great. If you don't trust the ledger, then you don't know if you have the money. The voting is another thing. Trump lost in 2020. Said, oh, it was rigged. And when Al Gore lost in 2000, oh, it's rigged. And it's like every election of my lifetime since basically since 1988. It's been rigged in some way, and it's always a loser who complains. Wouldn't it be nice to have a voting system where you could check your vote and know it was counted correctly, and you can check the integrity of the system as a whole? It's the exact same problem as building a decentralized money system, and the exact same problem as building a decentralized social network, and an exact same problem as building a medical record system, because you can use blockchain to do all of that. And as long as you trust that the underlying infrastructure is secure, you're good. And my job, my life's goal is, how do I make it secure? How do I get the science right? How do I make it decentralized? How do I make it resilient to attacks? And why the token prices are so awesome is it creates a reward to break the system. When I first started, Bitcoin was under $1. No one cared. You couldn't pay somebody to take it and attack it. Now you have these multi-trillion-dollar systems. So every single day, the most vicious hackers and the most vicious attackers are trying to beat the crap out of the cryptocurrency space to steal money. And they do. North Korea does as a national policy. They attack exchanges all the time and steal millions and millions of dollars worth of Ethereum and other tokens. And so what that does is it creates this learning, and the systems get stronger and more resilient over time. And eventually they get to a point where they can run social scale infrastructure, like a nation state's elections or a nation state's money system or something like that. So that's kind of crypto in a nutshell. And the other thing is a smart cow effect. And this is something that's so cool. So if you're a rancher, you always have a lot of dumb cows, but then you have that one smart cow. And there's the most frustrating fucking cow. If you find it, you shoot it. Because the smart cow figures out how to get out. And they don't just get themselves out. If they can open up the fence, if they can open up the gate, all the other cattle follow them. So if you invent something in a global, open, decentralized sense, whatever idea you have is everybody else's idea. So the minute I figure out a secure protocol, everybody knows the secure protocol. The minute I figure out a secure voting system, everybody has a secure voting system, and they're royalty-free, they're open source. So what we've seen is an exponential growth in the innovation in the industry. So a great example would be zero-knowledge proofs. These are some of the wildest, coolest things. They were invented by MIT back in the 80s. It was Sylvia Macaulay and all these other guys, and they were geniuses, and they got like the Nobel Prize in computer science for it. But basically the idea of a zero-knowledge proof is for me to prove something to you without me telling you what it is. So, for example, let's say I want to prove to you my age, and I'm over a threshold. Like you go to a bar and you say, hey, are you at or over the age of 21? Well, how do you normally do that? I show you an identity document like a driver's license or a passport. But then the minute I do it, you know my exact age, you know my name, you know all this information. Well, what if I had a way to just generate a proof and it's yes or no? Are you at or over the age of 21, but you don't know my age? That's zero knowledge proof. And so they invented a way to do this in the 80s, and it was an academic toy. No one cared about it. It was like verified computing and mathematics stuff, and who cares? But then the cryptocurrency space said, well, hang on a second, we could use this to have private money and private voting and all this other stuff. So in just 5-6 years of the cryptocurrency space being interested in this topic, we went from a few papers being written a year, a few lines of code being written a year, to hundreds, to thousands of papers, to millions of lines of code and hundreds of projects and billions of dollars inside these systems. So it did probably in the last 5 years more that's been done in 40 years of academic research for that one thing. Wow. And that's the magic of the smart cow effect, is that when people start catching on to a good thing, they just go crazy with it.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.